Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. All the tournaments are over and preseason has begun in earnest. The players are back at London Colney doing all the important stuff, you know, the stretches, getting measured, saying hi to Win the dog, all of that crack. And also getting themselves ready for the preseason tour of the US. The first preseason games take place, well, next week. Arsenal take on Bournemouth in the LA Galaxy Stadium on Wednesday. And, of course, there's a game at SoFi Stadium with Arsenal playing Manchester United. As it's pre-season, I don't really care too much. Obviously, I'm invested in seeing how Arsenal are out there and looking forward to seeing some of the players. But in terms of results, it doesn't really make any difference. Last summer, we got beaten by Manchester United. I think it was a penalty shootout, or maybe we lost the game and they had a penalty shootout anyway. I can't quite remember, but the result isn't the main thing. However, despite not being a religious person, I'm going to pray to whoever is out there, if there's anyone out there at all, please, 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 in the game against Manchester United, can Garnacho just be a little bit offside and them have a goal disallowed and Erik ten Hag kind of loses it on the sidelines?
Oh, no. Not again.
I mean, I suppose we could get our entertainment from a good game of football in which we play well and score a lot of goals and everyone's raving about our performance, but I'll take what I can get. That's just the kind of guy I am. A little more on the US tour towards the end of the show, but with me now to discuss a few bits and bobs about transfers in and out, the state of the squad, building for next season, and lots more. It's Clive Palmer. Hi, Clive.
Hello. How are you?
I'm all right. I think like everybody I'm getting, now that the Euros are over, now that the Copa America is over, I'm not that I'm getting anxious about transfers, but I'm really curious and interested to see what we do and how we do it and what way we're going to shape up the squad for next season. You know, I'm not pressing any kind of panic buttons or anything at this point, but I'm ready. I'm ready for something to happen. How about you?
I am, and all we have to go on is recent history. In the last couple of summers, we've been really organised, haven't we, when it comes to transfers, and we've all guessed the links. We can all see them, and then we can all say we were right about this player arriving, and which is the whole thing, really. That's all that's important, that we're all right. And so, basically, this summer's completely different, and for many reasons. Obviously, the two tournaments, Copa America and the Euros, and the new financial restrictions. So it's the first summer of PSR. So you have your end of June deadline and you have thereafter. People, so before June, you have people running around scrambling with their balance sheets in their hands. And then you have a little bit of a breather when people are on holiday or coming back from the Euros, etc. And then the next phase, which is almost the pre-tour phase.
Yeah.
Right? So when people start to get on airplanes and try to promote their clubs, etc., it would be nice to have a new player to get everyone excited about, right? So that's probably what's happening right now.
Beyond the fact it would be nice to have a new player, I think there is sort of a discussion to be had about the way Arsenal are going to go into this season. And, you know, we've seen the fixture list. It is a tough fixture list. We've seen players away at the Euros. They've enjoyed various degrees of disappointment, I guess you would say. Some of them have gone there, played very well, but played a lot. And ultimately, you know, in the cases of Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, Aaron Ramsdale, maybe even William Saliba to an extent with a semi-final exit, have played a lot and have come out of that tournament feeling a little bit disappointed, maybe a little bit fatigued, a little bit jaded. And I think the challenge for Arsenal, you know, next season, and we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves with this kind of a discussion, but, you know, to do better than we did last season is going to be a tall order. It's going to be really tough. It's going to be a big, big, big challenge. And, you know, beyond all the sort of stuff about a new player coming in and he's a shiny new guy and everybody loves the new signing and it's exciting when those players come in, to what extent do you think it's important for Arsenal to be able to go in at the start of the season? And I accept that there might be transfers, and I do think this is going to be a transfer window which runs much more towards the end of the window, like the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think things will really start going. But from an Arsenal perspective, maybe not for the tour, but certainly for the first couple of games, the first 2-3 games, how important do you think it is that we have faces and legs in that squad who provide a little bit of a lift, not just for us as fans, but for the other players in the squad who have got to, get themselves going again after the disappointment of last season, disappointment during the summer. And, it feels to me like having fresh legs, having new faces will be part, or very important part of like raising this squad again and getting them ready to go right from the off.
I think it's really important, Andrew. I think there was a great Arteta interview about a week or so ago, and he spoke about, changing the environment slightly. When the players come back, they need to see that it's different, that we're going again. And part of that is competition for your place. Part of that is I've got to work even harder to play. I look around me and all the standards have gone up. And then because when you walk through the door, you know where the ambitions are. And if people look tired and jaded and the coaches are not bothered and the equipment looks tatty and old and the drills are the same, I'll tell you what you do. You think, I'll just do my thing. But if everything's fresh, bright, everyone's going again, new players, new standards, new goals, really efficient messages coming through to the players to make sure they understand what they have to do before each game. I think that's key, absolutely key. But in the end, when you are fighting for your position, you just are a bit sharper. And when you hear people talk about the margins and the gains, marginal gains, etc., how do you get that? How do you drive the extra 2% out of people? Well, when they know someone could put them out of the team for a month, trust me, they're trapping that ball and that pass is getting there on time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And those are the margins that we need to get to. So signings do help with that, Andrew.
Yeah.
That environment.
I do wonder if there are maybe some parallels with the window when we brought in Martin Odegaard on a permanent deal. It was 2021. It was a Euros summer as well. And some of the deals didn't happen until a little bit later on in the window. And when you look at the fixture list, it's Wolves at home and then it's Villa away. And then is it Man City after that one? It's, let me have a look here. It's Brighton, isn't it? And then there's a North London derby.
Then we have a bit of a break. I think we have an international break. Because we need that, don't we, right now? A couple more internationals thrown in there. Then we come back into the Spurs, Man City part of the season. So it's tough. Yeah.
The arrival of new players and who those players might be, of course, is something that's open to question, because I think in previous summers we've had a better idea of who it is we're going to bring in. And I know we've been strongly linked with Calafiori. It's gone a bit quiet. Obviously, there might be some complications with the sell-on clause involving Bologna and all the rest. There have been names mentioned, Merino, Zubimendi, although he might stay. It's gone very quiet on the striker front, on the forward front. I know as well, Nico Williams is a name that people mention a lot, but I don't know how realistic that is. And maybe if Barcelona come calling, that's an easier move for him to make. Are you a little bit surprised by that? Because there was this concerted effort to try and get Sesko in before the Euros. I mean, do you think they just saw that as an opportunity for to get a deal done quickly and get a player in, or are there going to be some consequences in terms of how we then try and do our business if Jesus is fit again, if Havertz is fit again? Do we go in a different direction with that forward signing? Are you expecting a name to emerge? Let me ask you that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've read every single Twitter timeline of all the people that know stuff, and it is quite quiet, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite quiet. But not only that is it quiet, Andrew, some of the names don't really excite me, and maybe I'm getting a little bit fussy in my older age. I can find fault with too many, and I think that's maybe taken away a little bit of enjoyment of the transfer window, which I love, but I just don't find it exciting. And the reason why, I suppose, we're so good now that I question if they can get to levels of the people that we know that have got to the 91 goals and the 89 points. I mean, we know this that's there. So So I find myself questioning these players. That's not really fair. Until you see them in the shorts, you see them within the team, you see the relationships they build. I don't think it's right for us to sort of not be as excited as we could be. The Sesko thing for me, I thought that was a really interesting one. I thought it'd be a great backup for Kai Havertz in a same sort of physical style. And then obviously Kai can't play 90 minutes 3 times a week for 4 months. No one can do that. So what happens when you need to make a change? Just the team dynamics completely change. So that was my thought process there. And my thought process was, as we saw in the Euros, you could see Fulkrug playing for Germany. He came on for the last period of the games, and Germany were able to power up and impact games late in games. And I want Arsenal to be able to do that. I don't want to see Bukayo Saka dragging his feet in the last 20 minutes of a game. Why should he? We should be able to freshen up from the bench. I think that's got to be the next phase for us, because we were in a stage last year where people were saying, Arteta doesn't trust so many people. But for me, I think it's more a quality thing. Did we trust the quality?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what we need to up the quality, and I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I don't think it's a personal thing. I think it's about the quality of the players. And maybe, to sort of expand on the point you've made there about maybe some of the names and some of the signings feeling a bit unexciting or underwhelming. Maybe that's a bit unfair, but I understand where you're coming from. But is that not a consequence of you're not necessarily looking to add star quality to your first team? What you're looking to do is replace those players in whom the manager doesn't seem to have a great deal of trust with players who might be a bit better than they are, or a bit more suited to what the manager wants, but at the same time are sort of high-functioning squad players. Is that maybe the right way to categorize them?
Absolutely. And the Merino one is an interesting one, right? So you can sort of see that deal. You try to understand it. It sort of makes a bit of sense. It's 20 million quid, right? So his last year of his contract. He's 28-year-old, just turned. He plays in a Spanish team, which is a very similar system to us. He plays part of a 3-man midfield. He's a lefty that can play behind or in front or next to Declan Rice, or instead of. And he has similar off-the-ball capabilities. So he smashes it in duels, etc. And we know they're really important to us. So straight away, you look at our principles of play, you look at him and you say, well, tick, day one, like similar to Jorginho, you can come in and you understand this level of football. Yeah. You just understand it. You get it. And so when we have Champions League games, which we have about 50 this season, he can just play one. And I think, again, it's opening our minds up to a new season, again, where we're playing different competitions. Champions League has changed structure, extra games, but extra opponents. What I didn't realise, it's almost like you're playing 6 or 7 new teams rather than just 3. So and I think that's going to be a challenge for the players, and you have to have a game model for each opponent, and so you need to have alternatives. And we saw at the Euros, it's only human, right? We saw at the Euros that even Declan Rice gets tired. And that's the truth. And we can't just expect these players to keep churning out without dropping their performance. So you almost have to project forward and say, okay, how do I protect the legs of people who I know are there by bringing somebody else who can perform at the level or very close to? And that's got to be a sensible next step.
Yeah, it occurred to me during the week, that someone like Merino, given his age, given his experience, is kind of like a plug and play kind of player. Bring him in. He doesn't have to do the hard study maybe that young players need. He doesn't necessarily need all the tactical guidance that younger players might need. And even Declan Rice, when he arrived last year, couldn't stop talking about how much he learned and how much he had to learn to fit into Mikel Arteta's system. And look, I'm not being critical of his past. Clearly what he did at West Ham got him the move to Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. But maybe there is a sophistication about what Arteta is doing versus what David Moyes has been doing, or other managers that he worked with, that meant he had to go through that process. Whereas someone like Merino, given the fact that he has played in Spain, he's playing for Real Sociedad, but he has played for Borussia Dortmund. He's got Premier League experience with Newcastle. He strikes me as somebody who, if you do need a midfield signing, is someone who can come in and hit the ground running, even if he's not necessarily going to be a starter every week.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I mean, You've seen his fixture schedule. I mean, I think Scott wrote something the other week that from September right through to nearly January, we're literally playing every 3 days. So that's it. So the game has changed, right? So we're going to have alternatives. And as fans, we love building our first 11s, but we're going to have to get comfortable with maybe certain people not being there. And if they're not there, does the level maintain? Because we're all hoping we had 2 close years, one unexpected, one more expected, but didn't quite get there. But we saw a lot of good habits and behaviours which tell everybody that we're on our way.
Mm-hmm.
So now everybody's expecting something similar. With a very difficult start with some of our star players playing late in the Euros. Of course, those first 2 games worry me to death. Because not just we might not pick up all the points, but because how we will all respond to that. You know? And it is important. Every point is important in August as it is in May. So that's going to be a very interesting start for us all. And I think if we can accumulate points with using multiple players to make sure that people can either come back without the minutes in their legs a little bit later and rested, we've got to make sure that happens. So I do think the signings are important, Andrew. But one last thing, though, I do think also there are a number of players last year that were either injured, out of form for big chunks of the season that we can restore. You know, and I think when we see them, they may make us feel different about our depth. And to add to that even more, if we add a younger player into the group or 2 that looks at the level, suddenly we feel better with some internal solutions.
Well, that's true, yeah, because Jurriën Timber, for example, is somebody who everybody is excited to see play next season. As yet, we still don't quite know where he is going to play. I think that's going to be a very interesting aspect of what way this squad is built and where it's built. I mean, I've seen even the classic, can we move him into defensive midfield? Arsenal fans and their desire to make defenders defensive midfielders is a tale as old as time. But, there are obviously options within the squad and there is depth within the squad. And if Tomiyasu can stay fit, Timber can stay fit, you bring in, if you do get Calafiori in, it might mean the end for Kivior or Zinchenko or somebody, but you still have a really great defensive platform on which to build. But when we talk about, the players who didn't play a lot last season, there are some noises and some stories beginning to circulate about those. We'll go through a few of them. Obviously, Reece Nelson being linked with West Ham, which I think for him would be a fantastic move. I think that'd be a really good signing or a really good decision for him to make where he can probably have a better chance of playing regular football. I would say if I was flipping it around, if I were a West Ham fan, I think I would find his signing a little bit underwhelming. A highly rated young player at the Arsenal Academy who hasn't really kicked on in the way that people expected. And the amount of playing time in his short career is, like, I did the numbers this morning. He made his debut in 2018, his Premier League debut.
Right. Since
then, he has played a grand total, and I know he's been out on loan a couple of times as well, 1,321 Premier League minutes, which is not a lot. When you consider Bukayo Saka, who made his debut after him, has played 13,445 Premier League minutes. And I'm not saying they're like for like, but I'm just saying the sort of the career trajectories of these two guys are very, very different. And if you're a West Ham fan, you're probably going, God, how much are we going to pay for this guy?
Yeah, he's a strange one, but he's also, that's not a lot of minutes actually, is it? But I think it's imperative for him, whatever he does next, he has to play football, proper football. And for all the training he does in the week, when the Saturday comes, you're in the dressing room, put your shin pads on, not putting on a tracksuit. You know what I mean? And I think it's so important for your mentality that you feel wanted and part of something. And I hope he goes for him, really. Because he's worked so hard from a young boy to be here, and all you want to do is play. And Arsenal's level has risen so much in the last 2 years that those opportunities become less and less. And when he has come in, he's done fine. He looks sharp. He looks well. And Brighton looked at him as an opportunity before he signed a contract. And they're not stupid when it comes to spotting talent. So I think there's a player there. I think maybe sometimes I felt at times the environment at Arsenal can be a bit big. And some days he's hot and some days he's cold. But he always looks fit to me. He looks sharp. He looks quick, which tells me he must work so hard in between games where he doesn't play. So I've got a lot of respect for him. And I really hope he gets to make his career somewhere else.
Yeah, I think it's he's not alone in the need for a move. At this point of his career where things don't go well, because Mikel Arteta has often spoken about Reiss Nelson as a great talent and spoken about what a good player he is, and he's spoken about Eddie Nketiah and how hard he works and what a beast he is in training, and he's spoken about Emile Smith-Rowe and spoken about the talent that's there and the quality that he has and the number 10 shirt. But managers speak with words. Managers also speak by what they do when it comes to pinning that team sheet up on the dressing room wall on a Saturday or whenever it might be, that they can say things with words about a player, but when you see how they use a player, that tells you the real story, I think. It's part of the job is to talk well about your players and talk up the quality of your players. But when you don't use them, when they don't play, I don't know, you come to understand where they are in the manager's pecking order. And over the course of the last 6 months, Eddie didn't really play much in the Premier League, didn't really play much at all, thrown on at the end of games, wasn't starting games. Smith-Rowe, we have this chink of light where the door is open. He played against Luton, did really well. Is this the return? And it didn't quite turn out like that. And both of these guys have been linked with moves away. Eddie to Marseille, which would be very interesting, and Smith-Rowe to Fulham and Crystal Palace, who are, I don't know if they're making bids or talking about making bids, or there's certainly that sort of chatter around both of those clubs and Smith-Rowe. But for me, they're in the Nelson bracket as well, where they've got to play. They're at a point where chances at Arsenal are going to be so limited and have been so limited that I'm not saying it's Mikel Arteta telling them what's what, but I think they have to look at their situations and realize that if they want to play regularly, the likelihood is they're going to have to go somewhere else. Yeah,
absolutely. And the players and their agents and their families, I'm sure they'll recognise that it's time for a change of environment for them. And it's still been a massive success for the academy, etc., to get these players to first team men's level in the Premier League. That's a success. And how they are used, I think Arsenal have used them well, but I do think it's time for them to go. I think with Smith-Rowe, for example, the Fulham one seems the hottest one entry. That seems really... And then you look at their team, you look at the players that he could be replacing, you can see a role for him there. Mm-hmm. And you can really see it. And the style of play from the manager, that's what you want. I mean, all a young player wants is to be wanted, and they seem to really want him. Marseille one maybe calling a little bit for Eddie, but there are other clubs that like him, like Palace, like Wolves. And again, I think he's got a lot to offer a team. He can definitely show that he can score in the Premier League. And there's something untapped there for somebody else in another system with different people around him, with different relationships, for example. So when we see them, when we see players like Havertz come along and then, been the centre-forward for Germany now and the centre-forward for Arsenal now, that wasn't the case a few months ago. Mm-hmm. He was playing left-back for Germany a few months ago, and we weren't sure what he was doing for Arsenal in the very early stages. We were worried about him. Yeah. Now he's found himself, found relationships, connected with Odegaard and Saka, etc. And we look a much better team with him. And that's just happened. And it can happen to some of these younger players as well when they find their role, find their confidence, feel more accountable in an environment as not just one of the younger players who's come up from the post room, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Not one of the younger players, somebody's been brought in as a senior signing, and that can change your whole dynamic.
Is the biggest beneficiary of the potential departure of Smith-Rowe and maybe Reiss Nelson, maybe even Eddie, Fabio Vieira.
Mm.
Because, if I'm looking at those players objectively, if Smith Rowe isn't getting his playing time and Fabio Vieira isn't getting, I don't think I don't think they're too distinct, to be honest. Like if Fabio Vieira was realistic about how much he played in the second half of last season, he might be looking elsewhere. But I think there is a limit on what the club can do and how many players they can move on in one summer. And I think Vieira, not that he's in the last chance saloon, but I think by virtue of the focus being elsewhere, is probably safe at Arsenal for the season ahead.
Yeah.
What do you think the demands on Fabio Vieira should be? What can we expect from Fabio Vieira? Is it a case that at this point he has to maybe nail down a position? Because I don't think it's the de facto replacement for Bukayo Saka on the right-hand side. I don't really think that's where he operates best. I don't think it's necessarily the left 8 where he has played a few times and started there and hasn't really done it.
Yeah.
Is his role the Odegaard backup? Is that where he can be useful for Arsenal this season when we think about cup games and maybe some European games and maybe some fixtures or some situations where we're doing well, the game is pretty much secure and you can manage the minutes? Because I do think that's another part of how how our transfer business sort of knits together, is the ability to not just like make changes at the start of games, but to manage the minutes of players within games when we're in a position to do that.
That's a really good question, actually. I haven't been thinking about him recently. So as always, you've dug the parts of my brain that were sleeping. So I think with Vieira, I think obviously I think preseason is really important. I've always watched the preseason games, and we'll be travelling to watch some preseason games next week. And I think he'll be one of the players that in 2 weeks' time we're going to know a lot about where he is. It's not just about his playing ability, because when you look at him, he obviously can do the last thing, the last cross, the last shot, the last pass. He can do that. But for me, it's about how he plays within the construct of the team and how he builds relationships with other players. And I think that's really key, because there's no point in having talent if you're sort of loose on the side and you're not controlling the ball, you're not moving it quickly enough. You just look like a really talented player, but no one can connect to. And when the pass mats come out, there's a dot there, but no pass is coming in. But you can see him moving, and he's quick enough, he's sharp enough, he defends well, he's got a great clip on the ball from either side, but he needs to connect in this team. And sometimes, Andrew, when you see players go from the squad and you go up the hierarchy, maybe you think, well, you know what, I've got to do it now.
Yeah. Because
if I don't do it, there's a young 17-year-old kid here in the background that looks pretty handy. I could do that Odegaard role. And when the ball goes into his feet, it comes out clean, And so if very, very quickly can be overtaken by somebody else within the club. And so he has got work to do, Yeah. Again, it's another player who we lost from last season, really, that we can regenerate. And I would say the same, mate. I would say the same for Gabriel Jesus. And I would say the same for maybe half a season for, maybe it's a bit harsh, maybe a third of the season for Martinelli. But if we were to find these players again, restore them back to their top level, that is a significant change to our squad.
Yeah, I think Jesus and Martinelli are the two really, the ones with the most potential to contribute and find their level. Like I read, I don't know if it was James who did something in The Athletic, but basically he really was struggling with that injury. The one that he picked up in, I can't remember which game it was, Sheffield United maybe, I'm not sure. But that cut on his foot really did have a big impact on him. Gabriel Jesus, as we know, flitted in and out with knee problems and was having issues there. It doesn't seem like there's been any surgery. And those two, I think, have the potential to score and make assists and contribute from an attacking perspective. And I think, highlighting those as players who can really step up again, I think it is spot on. But Vieira, for me, maybe last chance saloon, because you mentioned a 17-year-old who's waiting in the wings, and Ethan Nwaneri is probably going to get some playing time on the US tour. And I have to say, I think it's obviously going to be a fairly, not a threadbare squad. It's not going to be as strong a squad. So I don't know how much exactly we're going to be able to learn from pre-season, but certainly what Mikel Arteta might try with Nwaneri will be interesting and something to keep an eye on, not just in the games out in the US, but when we come back and as we get a little bit closer to the kickoff of the Premier League, just how involved he is and what Mikel Arteta asks of him in pre-season, because it feels to me like this is the moment where his integration is really going to start. From now on, they've got to get him properly integrated into this first team squad.
Yeah, I spoke to some people that went to the Bournemouth game last week, and there's a clip of him scoring a goal, Andrew, and it's like he just knocks it, gets it back, and then he sprints away from people and scores. And yeah, I don't like to go too heavy on young players. You never can tell, right? Mm-hmm. But I have to say, I don't think he's a secret to the UK. Everyone knows who he is. He's on the England track, and when he plays for those games, he wears number 10 on his back. And he looks like a very good player with a good mentality. And I'm in a month's time, we'll be talking slightly different about him, I feel. There are plenty of games at the youth level as well, the Champions League games that they have. But so I think there are minutes for young players coming into the group, into the squad, who are maybe just new professionals, for example. But he can't hold talent back. And there are rumours in the background, just the people chatting that Odegaard is mentoring him, and which I really like. He buddy up and mentor people. And he's 17, right? He's still growing, but the talent is obvious. And when he does reach physical maturity, I don't think he can be stopped. So let's just see. We're very lucky to have him. Very lucky to have him, and I think we're doing the right thing. And if he doesn't go on the US tour, I'll be disappointed. Very disappointed. I
mean, there's got to be so much room for young players on this tour because of how many players are coming back late. I think Arteta said there are 4 sort of increments of players coming back depending on how far they went in their respective international tournaments. So there is room, and when you look at the young players, when you look at the academy players we have at our disposal, I suppose he and Miles Lewis-Skelly are the two that will probably want to take their chances more than anybody. They feel like the two that are most ready, despite the fact, we've had guys out on loan like Norton Cuffy, Charlie Patino's been out on loan, and maybe are a little bit ahead in terms of their overall development. But when you consider whether or not they're going to be the guys to stake a claim for a first team place, it's these two, I think, that are going to be the most, the ones who can benefit the most from some preseason involvement.
Yeah, I think so. And there are a couple others, but I don't know enough about them yet. And but those two are the ones that have really been earmarked as potential players, and most of the fan base know who they are, and they're just waiting for them, really. And I think this is probably the summer that we're going to see them next to men, and see how they look, and I think it's important that people recognise there's an emotional and physical development that happens around a 17-year-old age to like 19, where you can literally transform over summer holidays, come back and you look different. Yeah. And so I'm very interested to see how they look and how they connect and how they combine. They've got, very exciting futures. And I honestly believe that the club's in a good place for them. When we look at some of our youth players, in previous years, they would come in but we weren't quite as good as we are now. So when we talk about special players, they have to be Champions League players, not just Premier League players. And that's where we are now. So there's no certainties, but I must admit, I'm excited to see them in particular.
Yeah, because I remember being out in the US in 2019, I think it was. They were in Los Angeles. They played a game in Los Angeles, and then they were in, was it Charlotte, I think? But I remember being at a game, it was Arsenal versus Bayern Munich in the LA Galaxy Stadium, and just sort of coming away from that game, looking at Joe Willock and thinking, there's a player there, and he's ready to, to start that process of being integrated. And also Bukayo Saka was one who you looked at that summer and saw, okay, there's real potential in this player. So as much as people, want to talk about preseason as being a marketing thing, and there are elements of that, obviously, you can spot the talent and maybe the readiness of a player, because you can see talent at youth level all the time. It's when you see that talent do it on a field of senior players, playing with them and also playing against them, that you get a better understanding of how ready they are.
Absolutely. And I know when we see these names, we make the assumption that they're all going to play for Arsenal. And when they don't, we then say, why haven't we got enough money for them? Why are they going here? Blah, blah, blah. Actually, the goal should be just to produce first-team players, and that doesn't always have to be at Arsenal. If they're good enough, they'll play for Arsenal. But to be first-team men's players at the highest level they can possibly be, I think it's a great achievement for the club. Some of them will end up in non-league and they have to come back again because they're not quite ready physically or mentally, or even to get back to the top level. And that's happened this week. One of the players has gone down to play for Bromley, I believe, and he could come back up the leagues and be a low league player. But playing for Arsenal is not an option. So yeah, it's the academy has made different roles, but then there's every now and again you get your star actor, you get your lead actor, and we've got a couple. We've got a couple of lead actors coming, mate. Definitely.
All right. Well, we'll see what they do over the course of pre-season. We have a few questions here from our Discord. We'll fly through a couple of those. First up, this is it's two different questions. One from Sang Kariko 44. He says, every year under Arteta, we seem to tweak something through a transfer or a departure we were not expecting. Do you think we're going to be surprised this year? And if so, in what position? And Rusticles also asks, do you think we might evolve into a different formation this season?
Well, the one area that's on my mind is the fullback area. And not just maybe the names changing, but although potentially we've got a couple of, with Timber coming in and potentially Calafiori coming in, there's a couple of new names there. But I think how they play, Andrew, I think everyone knows what you want to do, build up in central areas. So basically, how they play is really important. So to be more attacking and more forward-thinking. And so your defenders, they're the ones that have the ball the most. When we pop on the SofaScore after a game, we look at the touches, it's those defenders that have the ball. Those defenders now are the first line of your attack. So when we're thinking, we can see the least goals in the league last year, while you look at another defender, but these are attacking defenders. And so when you have the ball, the ability to travel with it and attract people to you allows you to break down these blocks. So I think I'm looking at style of fullbacks, the style of fullback play on both sides, which will allow us to break some of these teams and be far more transition orientated. And it starts from the back, And so midfielders, steady midfielders like Merino, they're almost second phase ball pressers. Build-up players almost come from the back, and I think that's where I think Arteta's been very smart and how he's defined us, because those guys start our first phase of attack, but they also stop the first phase of the opponent's attack and create mini transitions. And I can see more of those players coming our way.
Do you think there's going to be a bit more focus on the left-hand side this summer? Because, the right-hand side, maybe we've been lucky, maybe it's more accident than design, although that's not giving people the right amount of credit. But, that Ben White, Bukayo Saka with Martin Odegaard inside them dynamic has worked really, really well for Arsenal. And I think there is, likely to be a bit more rotation in the right back position this year, because we do have Juri and Timber there. Who knows if Ben White will go back to international duty now that Gareth Southgate and, more importantly, Steve Holland is gone. On a selfish level, you'd say, well, I hope he doesn't play for England. But, if he's called up, I'm sure he'll be proud to represent his country the way he has been in the past. That impediment to his selection is gone. And, of course, players like Kyle Walker, Kieran Trippier are probably going to retire from international duty, at least this summer. So there is more room for him to play. But that right-hand side has been so fundamental to Arsenal over the last couple of years, whereas last year in particular, and there might be reasons for it with injuries to Martinelli, injuries to Jesus, issues at left fullback, shall we say, sort of lack of consistency in terms of those team selections and dynamics on the left-hand side. That's the thing that's in my mind about this summer, is whether or not we focus a bit more on building something on the left, which takes the attacking burden. I mean, it's kind of weird to say because Trossard scored a load of goals and played primarily from the left-hand side. But I think if you were looking at one area of the pitch where Arsenal could go up a level or hone their attacking play, it is the left-hand side for me.
It is, and I think changing the dynamic is an important one. I think having the ability to run through teams, and I don't know how you're going to describe it. You know the way Timber plays, he sort of pops it and then runs through lines. Runs through lines, creates distractions, creates underlaps and overlaps. I think Martinelli needs that. And I said his name because he's the future. He's the one with the big contract. He's a 22-year-old. He needs a bit more action around him, people that join him. So when we build on the right-hand side and we stay on that side and we build and then we switch the point of attack to the left, our ability to support him very, very quickly is important. So as long as you fast support, get around, create combinations, then you can really shift teams side to sides. I think if you look at our team just from 20,000 feet, you're looking at it, you're thinking, okay, if I'm in opposition, where do I attack? Well, I'm not going down Saliba, Ben White side. Well, there's no point in doing that, right? Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I'll go to the left back side because they've got indecision there. They've got Zinchenko, Kiwior. I'm going to go there. So we just shut that hole down straight away so people don't even try to go there, which I think we're going to do with the new additions. And then also attacking that side, I think we need to be a little bit more balanced, so we don't all look to Bukayo Saka because, mate, that kid deserves to get his feet up for 3 weeks. But I'm already thinking, please come back for those big games, Spurs City, Villa, can you be back?
Yeah.
Which is totally unfair, isn't it? It's totally unfair. So that tells me we need something else there in better form to take the burden off of him.
Do you think the fabled flying winger is still a thing they might be looking at? Because, we've talked about it before and I've heard many people talk about the need for maybe an injection of pace in the forward line. Yeah. It's not that I think we're particularly slow, but when you think about what we don't have, the other weapons that we might use, that sort of raw pace, which obviously has to be combined with a certain amount of technical ability because otherwise you just end up Mudricked all over the place. But, it is something that Arsenal have been linked with a lot. Mudryk is a player we've been linked with a lot, a player that Arsenal reportedly, we know they were in for him. Pedro Neto, somebody who Arsenal have been in for, who they really like him. He's very, very good technically, but super quick as well. Is that something you'd like to see?
I definitely. I think we can mix and match at centre forward. We've got players who can play in there, and the interior of a team now is so congested that you need to have people who understand and facilitate and can link. But do we have enough stretchers? Right. So Trossard really isn't an over the top guy. He can do it, but that's not. We don't want to do that all the time. He's 29, right? The old hamstrings will go. We don't do that all the time. We know Martinelli can do it, and you're absolutely right. Before the Sheffield United game when he got injured, he was showing real signs of getting some form back. So maybe we've just forgotten. Well, I've forgotten how good he can be. I'd love to see him restored. Saka's a bit more of a ball-to-feet guy that goes over the top when he needs to, when it's appropriate. So I think the ability to stretch teams, particularly late in games, would be good. Jesus is ball-to-feet. Kai can go over the top, down the sides, but again, late in games, we want to change that. So the ability to have transitions, particularly late after we scored our 2 goals, is good. And I think as soon as people see that you have no outlet, he says, after watching England for a month, you have no outlet, right? What do teams do? They just squeeze onto you, control the territory, knowing you can't hurt them. having that transition ability is important. Now, who it could be, I like Neto, Andrew. I watched him in the Euros in the time that he came on, and I thought, oh, you're not looking that quick. He played left wing back in one game. I wasn't sure, but then there was a recovery run that he had to make, and suddenly I saw this thing shoot across the screen. I thought, oh, there you are.
Yeah,
you're still there. You're still there. You just need to be fit. And I think if the price was reasonable, maybe that would be the answer. But I'm not sure on that price. It's too heavy, mate. It's too heavy.
Yeah, it depends. It really does depend on price, because you have to take into account the injury situation as well. And it is a question of who is going to be available. You know, Nico Williams, I'm not sure he's a quick, obviously quick player, but there's it's not just about the pace with him. And I think when we think about the availability of a player, I mean, I don't think he's out of Arsenal's reach. I don't think he's an unrealistic signing by any means. But I think Barcelona, if they really, really, really push for him, will probably have a better chance of getting him than we would. That's just my thinking on it, you know?
It just is purely a fit for him culturally and where he wants to be. You know, he's playing with his best mate for the next 6-7 years, maybe longer, on the other wing, and you can see Barcelona, they'd be dumb not to try to get him, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
they'd be absolutely silly, because they can be team-defining players with Yamal on the right-hand side. But it's the same for us, right? So we've got a player on the right-hand side who looks pretty good, but it's just whether we can do it. And he's just signed a contract, and but he's thinking, I'm staying until Barcelona can get me. The Barcelona situation is so fluid, shall we say, financially.
Yeah.
You're never sure what to believe. So let's see what happens.
What about this with Manchester United signing Lenny Euro, apparently? Snooner Gunner says, it reminds me of when Saliba joined Arsenal, 18-year-old French prospect. How do you think Saliba would have done if he'd started playing for matches for Arsenal in 2019 alongside Mustafi and David Luiz?
Did my laughter give it away? I think, at 18, he wasn't ready. He was probably ready at a year later, closer to being ready to be rotated in, but Arsenal took the 3-year loan route, and I'm so glad we didn't mess that one up, mate. And that would look pretty bad on us now, wouldn't it, if we messed up the whole situation with Saliba. But Lenny Oro, I think he's got 1 year to go on his contract. I think Manchester United paid north of £60 million for somebody 1 year to go. You know? Real Madrid were prepared to wait. They would have paid up to around 30 million for him in this last year of his contract. They're prepared to wait. Manchester United have gone big into a system, into a team which has Lindelof, Maguire, Rams just gone. Martinez is a good player, but he's an undersized centre back, and in my opinion, should be at full back. You're going into that group. Johnny Evans has re-signed a contract. Well done. And so, it's very difficult for him, you know, and regardless of his talent, which people say he has got fantastic potential. 18, the instability of that environment could be a challenge for him early, and I hope Manchester United protect him and don't ruin him and play him every single week. Interesting to see what they do if they go back 3, because he's definitely a sweeper type defender. You know, the sweeps along, he's very quick, very leggy. But if they put him in next to Martinez, I think it could be a challenge for him in the first phase. But I think the way they attracted him was to tell him he was going to be a senior player and he would play. And so that's one to watch. You know, I'm not sure defensively Manchester United is the most stable place I would have gone.
There aren't too many 18-year-old centre halves who are ready to play at the top end of the Premier League, and that is the reality. And I agree with you. I think, you know, Saliba was probably ready to play for Arsenal a year before he did, but even that was, you know, kind of rare, and is kind of rare. And Saliba is I mean, he was so good at the Euros, and he is at 22 years of age. I don't want to say he's the finished article, because I think there's always room for improvement. There's always room for a player to get better. But, you know, for a centre-half to be as good as he is at 22 is kind of incredible. Because we've had brilliant centre-halves in our lifetimes, Clive. We've seen some young players come through. You know, one man who captained the club to a Premier League title or a league title in 3 separate decades wasn't half bad as a central defender, but certainly was someone who had to grow into his talent and grow into his career. So I often find the discussion around Saliba quite interesting. Like, there's this acknowledgement of what a good player he is, but it's so rarely mentioned about how young he is. And to be able to do what he does with the consistency that he does it at 22 years of age. Not to mention, by the way, he played on the other side of central defence for France. Like, we have him as a right-sided defender. He plays as a left-sided defender. I do think there are players who are a bit more interchangeable. But, you know, you have your favourite side. As a central defender, you've got your favourite side, and you do have to adjust a little bit. But, like, it was just seamless, wasn't it, watching him at the Euros for France?
It was. It's a compliment to him to be moved to the left-hand side, because Upamecano couldn't move to the left-hand side because he hadn't got the ability to play on his wrong side.
Yeah.
So they moved Saliba over. But he's the junior partner. By the end of the tournament, he was a senior partner. You know, and it's just how he makes you feel. He doesn't play young, does he, Andrew? He doesn't play young. So we forget how young he is. He plays old, particularly in any sort of contact situation. He plays old. And back to my earlier point, he's the first line of our attack as well. So when he gets the ball, he can attract people onto him and move through the first line, no problem. It gives us advantages further up the pitch. And so it is. I remember us doing a podcast together, a live one, talking about Saliba, and we were relaxed about it. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. Crikey, I'm so glad it worked out. I mean, he has. We sort of said then, if he does make it in England, his style of play would be very difficult to ignore. He plays in a way that would transcend and transmit itself to people who are watching him. If that could go up a level, we will never forget this player. And here he is. Doing it at every single level you want. You know, he's got to reaccustom himself to the top level of Champions League against Bayern Munich, things like that, and really bring an aura and a presence to that level. That's the next phase of his career. Yeah, you know, and but that's coming for not just him, but for all our team now.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's hope he gets a nice rest as well, and you rest up now the next few days, and we'll see you next week and watch a bit of Arsenal together. Looking forward to that.
I am too. Can't wait, mate. I look forward to a couple of margaritas.
Yeah. All right then. You've twisted my arm on that one, Clive. Thanks a million.
Take care.
Thank you very much indeed to Clive. You can follow him on Twitter. He is at ClivePAFC, at ClivePAFC. And you can hear more of him in podcast format over with our friends from the Arsenal Vision podcast. We'll see Clive next week. Clive and Elliot will be joining myself and James for an event in LA on Thursday. It is sold out. I don't know if more tickets are going to become available. If they are, we'll put it over on our Patreon. We'll put it on our social media, etc. But we will be at the games. We'll be at the Bournemouth game on Wednesday. We'll be at the Manchester United game in SoFi on Saturday as well. So we are looking forward to seeing many of you at the event on Thursday. But if outside of that you see us around the games, please do come and say hello. It'd be great to say hi, and thank you so much to all of you guys for listening and for being with us throughout the season and the off season, of course. The blog will be continuing as normal while I'm away. Not by me though. The guys will be looking after you and making sure you get your daily edition every day over at arseblog.com. But if you'd like a bit more, if you'd like some more stuff from behind the scenes, some exclusive content from the US tour, it's probably going to be something like a US tour diary as I've done before. You can join us on Patreon for that and all of the other stuff that we do over there, including in a couple of weeks' time we'll be announcing our Fantasy Football League and a couple of new features for the new season on top of everything else. So if you want to get involved, patreon.com/Arseblog. That's patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, we're going to leave it there. James and I will have an Arsecast Extra for you on Sunday, so keep an ear out for that. There's travel next week, so I don't know quite what the podcast schedule is going to be like, but we'll do our best to keep things on track as much as possible. But do join us on Sunday for an Arsecast Extra. For now, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.
Join us as we take another enchanting adventure into the world of the angriest man on Twitter.
Oi, Arsenal! This is the time of the year when I typically look forward to the release of the away kit, which is very often my favourite kit. However, this time around I must take exception with that abomination that you have foisted upon the world. Not only does it have sleeves and a giant hole that you can put your head through, it is made up of various colours. And as we know, colours are woke, especially when you put some colours next to each other. That is super woke. I, for one, will not stand being bombarded with your ruthless ideology of inclusivity and togetherness. I will not be buying this shirt from the Arsenal megastore. But I do not rule out getting one from one of those cheap knockoff websites. It ain't woke if I'm basically stealing it.
Next week, another madcap laugh-a-minute romp with the angriest man on Twitter.
Everything is shit!